Hey, everybody, welcome to An Attorney and an Accountant Walk Into a Bar. I'm John, I'm the attorney, and my buddy here.
I'm Kent, and I'm the accountant.
All right, Kent, what are we going to talk about today?
Oh, this is gonna be fun. You ever watch the show Ballers? No, it's got the Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson on it, and it's about business management and investment management for high-profile clients. Awesome stuff. Athletes and celebrities.
Let's do it. Hey, Kent, so one of the things that, we do at TACSIS here that is certainly one of the more fun aspects of our business is that we do a lot of business management for celebrities, artists, and athletes. And I think it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting subject to talk about some of the hidden pitfalls and some of the things that, are unique or to athletes or, celebrities and those sorts of people, and also common to the same sorts of things that anyone in business needs to think about.
Yeah, people tend to think about celebrity or high-profile natures as having a lot of celebrity with a lot of liquidity, for example.
Right.
And especially with a lot of folks that get into a level of celebrity very rapidly, they have both a lot of opportunity in front of them, but also a lot of pitfalls. They typically don't come from backgrounds of tremendous wealth or historical wealth. And so some of the decisions that they make don't lead them to preserve that wealth in any good way. And when you start dealing with this group, you have so many professionals and non-professionals seeking to be advisors, like air quote advisors,
Right.
because a lot of hands start digging into the pot. And there's so many cautionary tales. The folks that end up filtering that we work with, we have a lot of we'll call it stringent rules for working with us, and those are meant to preserve their wealth. Because honestly, I am, and we are, really interested in them maintaining wealth beyond their celebrity and beyond their careers in athletics.
And it's so important because it's a few celebrities, especially athletes, whose success is longstanding, right? And we've seen many celebrities who have limited success but extreme wealth because they were smart with their money. And we've seen many celebrities and athletes who were extremely successful for a long term over their career and wound up broke. So I think, one of the most important things to point out is, you could put this under the topic of financial scams, but I think it's more importantly characterized as be wary of friends. They will betray you. Oh, that sounds terrible. Why would your friends betray you?
It does sound terrible.
It does. Well, the problem is that when you achieve sudden success, which most athletes and celebrities do, because usually they, work really hard, and then, there's some sort of sudden event, like a big movie or a big contract or some sort of success that they're thrust suddenly into having a lot of money. Well, that's not a lot different than winning the lottery. And I think
true.
it's pretty obvious. There's the stories are replete about people winning the lottery and having all these people come out of the woodwork, and it's very similar in our experience with working with these people that all of a sudden you've got a lot more friends than you used to, and all of a sudden a lot of the family that was sort of around, they're a lot more close than they used to be. And, if they're asking you for a loan or they're asking you for money and stuff like that, and, you're inclined to do that as an athlete, well, that's sort of your business. But I think where TACSIS or a management firm comes in important to a client is what about pitches? Because I think one of the more insidious ways that athletes or celebrities can, get taken, as it were, was that someone comes with a business idea. And it may not be that the friend has any ill intent, but usually there's someone who knows the friend and knows the friend knows the celebrity or athlete. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, I've got a really, really good deal. And maybe you could talk to your friend, your uncle, who's now very successful, and you get him to invest. And
we
now
call
you're
that-
gonna he's gonna make a lot of money on this.
I guess we call that the connect, right? The hookup.
the hookup.
And I think in that sense, we do two things. We do I think very well for clients. One is understanding our high profile client. What are their needs and also their investment profiles and their desires of what they need to do. So we really seek to understand who they are, because certain investments appeal to certain people with different risk profiles or appetites for call it that style or that genre of investment. And the other thing that we do a lot of work in is due diligence. Right. And that due diligence, we call that a penny wise and a pound foolish, where there's a cost to due diligence, but the after effect of failed due diligence or insufficient due diligence are contracts that aren't written up correctly, engagements or investments that are made without proper liens or without proper ways of mitigating or doing things when the deal goes wrong. Honestly, when the deal goes wrong, everything's all well and good if the deal goes well.
Oh, it always is.
Right? But it's when the deal goes wrong when they lie back and say, okay, was our contract in place? Who did the due diligence, right? And a lot of times it's not even in place.
Yeah, and it's also protection to your point, but also making sure that the pitch or the opportunity is something that is within the risk profile of the client and also legitimate, right? So doing that sort of due diligence for clients is important, but I think we serve a higher purpose or a different purpose in addition to that for the celebrity and athletes and other people who have come into sudden wealth, and that's this. It's hard to say no to your friends.
That's true.
Because you're now put in a position where, oh man, I got all this money, and my buddy here who, grew up with me through the hard times, and he's not doing so well, and the obvious thing is if he's asking you for money, well, that's personal. But if he's like pitching you something, you're like, oh, I really want to do this, and it sounds really good, and he's got your ear, and maybe you don't have a good feeling about it, or maybe you're not so sure about it, or maybe you don't even know what questions to ask. What we can provide for you is this. We can be the gatekeeper. You can say now, as that person, wow, hey, you know what? That sounds really interesting. That's really cool. But you got to run it by my business manager. You got to talk to them.
That's right.
And then we're not going to look at that person and say, well, who are you? No. What we're going to do is say, great, that sounds like a really good idea. Let's talk about what the idea is. Let's find out about, is that a viable idea? Mm-hmm. What are the potential profits for the idea? Who's your market? Who is your, so there's a lot of just general business questions in there. Is that a good pitch? A little Shark Tankish, right?
Yeah, sure.
Just asking the questions on, what kind of money is to be made here. That's step one. Step two is, the other due diligence. Well, what's the intellectual property? How are we going to own it? What's our deal going to be? What's my client's percentage? What's his return on his investment? What are the guarantees? How safe is this? And then we can kind of put that package together. And if we look at it and go, this could be a good idea, and then this is legitimate, then we take it back to our client and say, okay, this is the good, this is the bad. What do you want to do? We're not telling them what to do. We're providing them with the tools to analyze whether this is something they want to do.
And we're also in a good place to help negotiate strategy if you were to get into business. So that is, instead of maybe equity, perhaps it's a loan. Right? Or percentage or valuation is a huge thing as well in terms of just to your example, Shark Tanks. If our clients are the sharks, right, they need some professional advisory in saying, you know what, that valuation of $400,000 seems a little high since they have zero business, zero net income. Or they'll say, hey, that valuation is great. You should, for a $100,000 investment, you should have 30%, for example, right? Exactly. And we give that level of advisory. But the key part is that we never tell our clients what to do. What we do is we inform them and give them information so they can make the decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, it doesn't look like a great deal. It looks like it's probably a very risky investment. And the client says, I don't care, I want to do it. Great. You were informed, you did it. But I think the one that's really important to find out for the client is, no, this guy, is a criminal. Mm-hmm. This guy is ripped off. This guy who's a friend of your friend now has done all these bad things, and finding that kind of information out, I think, is the sort of thing that's going to be like, that's so. There's two levels. One is just finding out if it's even legitimate to start with, and then once we find out, yeah, well, this is square. The guy's honest. Is it? What kind of investment is it, and is it a good investment or not?
So if we're talking along lines of risk, right? One of the areas there's multiple areas of risk for celebrity and for athletes. And in this case, you're talking about investment risk. How about just other risks? So this goes into maybe some levels of estate planning. What are special estate planning things we would consider for someone of celebrity?
Well, I mean, that's a whole different level of risk, right? That doesn't have much to do with your investment, but it has to do with, a number of different things. Succession planning is really critical. So once someone comes into any kind of wealth, you have to plan for, well, what happens to my wealth when I become incapacitated? Who's going to manage my affairs if I become incapacitated? And that could be a temporary incapacity, which, for the athlete, that could be a very real thing. You could become temporarily incapacitated just because you had a bad hit on the field in the case of a football player, or, you take a baseball to the head, as in the case of a baseball player, or any number of other injuries that occur. You could become incapacitated for, I don't know, a week, a few days. And what happens? Who's going to write the checks? Who's going to pay the bills? That's a really important thing. So that's a succession planning.
Sure.
And then also, what happens to you when you die. And that's what estate planning does. It provides that, that knowledge going forward for the athlete.
And I think the extra level that we do too, especially for artists and actors, is that you have IP, you have potentially an album or intellectual property or brand that carries on beyond your and your likeness, that carries on beyond someone's lifetime. And that's a key, it's a very specific area that you want to estate plan for, which doesn't happen to the average American or even average wealthy individual or family group either. That's pretty specific that we dabble a lot in for our artists and our actors. Some of the other things too that you just mentioned on injury, a key area is insurance. Insurance needs for celebrities are very specific. Sometimes people are insuring specific body parts or vocal capabilities due to very specific injuries. Sports is the obvious one.
Or valuable property, if you've got valuable jewelry that you wear or a particular type of car that you drive. There's different levels of insurance for that.
There's also levels of insurance, very specific, for example, in athletes that are incident related. So there's insurance companies that we work with that will insure a person that is eligible to be first pick in the draft, and then they get drafted. And before they hit the field, they get injured. There's specific insurance for that.
Right.
We work with some of the biggest names in the country that are specific to all sports athletes and artists for things that maybe happen on tour. Maybe there's a large contract to go to 10 cities, but for some reason they can't. And there's injuries that's involved. There's insurance related to that, protect their overall interests. So I think a combination of estate planning, due diligence, insurance gives us as a business manager, an interesting trifecta of support. And that's not to say that we go the extra step, because business management is a lot of accounting and advisory, right? So my team in the accounting and advisory group takes care of that. But the thing that I think that we do really well is we combine that with I like to say this. Last time we talked to a client, I said the same thing. I like you, John, because you have the teeth, right? Because when things go awry,
there's that thing too. There's also just having a lawyer on your side, which is, getting into having to go to war, which is not something that we hope our clients get into. In fact, we try and keep them out of it. But, having that capability is certainly a really nice thing that I think our firm provides as well, in addition to all of the other things, is that if things do go bad at the end of the day, you've got a fighter in your corner.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not only to vigorously defend, but if we need to be on the attack, we will take everything to the hilt that's needed for our clients. So I love the fact that, not only keeping your money safe, but, it gives people better sleep at night, that, they have a team that's looking out for them that, kicks ass and takes names.
Well, I always say to my clients, just let me off my leash and I'll take care of it.
The other risk that we don't necessarily dabble in, but it's an area that is very important, especially for celebrity and athletes, is a very personal concept of marriages and divorces.
Ah.
The extreme rate of marriage and divorce in this field as well is just an incredible.
Well, that's great that you brought that up, Kent, because that dovetails very nicely with estate planning, marriage and divorces. So let's talk a little bit about that. So there's California in particular, but this is true of a lot of other states too, is a community property state. I'm sure everyone's heard that, what that means, right? And people have the concept, and this is especially true with actors and athletes, is they're often young when they're successful, and maybe they're not married when they're successful, and then they become married afterwards. So, everyone's heard the prenuptial agreement. That's a very obvious thing that, wealthy people do. But it's also an uncomfortable thing that people do, right? Because, the idea is, well, we're in love. This is forever. Death do us part, right? So how could I concern myself at all with what is yours and what is mine? And, what happens if we get to, well, how could I plan for that if this is forever, right? So that's fair sentiment when you're in that moment. So is there a way to deal with separate property and community property issues that doesn't involve signing that nasty old prenup?
I love this part because I deal with you a lot on this because we do a lot of the tax planning and you do the legal structure. I love the structures that we come up with that allow our clients to essentially avoid the heavy conversation,
Right.
because it's just been taken care of in an ironclad way before legal implications take place. You don't need to have the prenup.
Right.
And
there's a number of ways to do that, and the easy way to do it is planning ahead. To your point, which
Sure.
we do that. It's taken care of. We don't need to talk about it, and that's through a separate property trust, where you set up your separate property and it's in a trust, and that's defined. You also can do that as part of early estate planning. So you guys tie the knot. We got to go see the lawyer. We're going to do some estate planning, honey. We're gonna sit down and we're going to plan out, what happens to our assets if, God forbid, we're in a plane crash. We fly around a lot being celebrities, and, we could crash. We could be Buddy Holly, right? And we're dead tomorrow. So what's going to happen? Well, we need to plan for that. Well, part of the estate planning is going to be that we define in the estate plan what the separate property is. And we put schedules on what the separate property is and what the community property is too. I mean, I'm not saying that, we're going to be onerous and say everything's mine, but, we can plan that out. And typically, going into a marriage, it's not going to be a real question that, well, the things that you had before we got married is going to be your separate property, right? So we can define all that in a trust, and that trust will essentially serve the place of a lot of functions of the prenuptial agreement, at least when it comes to property. Now, not so much palimony and, child support and those sorts of issues. Those are best dealt with in a prenuptial agreement, but at least it's something. And if you don't want to have that, difficult conversation about the prenup, that's a good way to handle it.
So is there any hope for clients that has a view to repopulate the world like a Nick Cannon or Elon Musk?
Well, I suppose people like that can afford it, so maybe not. But I'll bet you old Elon's got it all figured out.
Only a few folks shall know, I guess, in that area. So. The other area that is of risk to entertainers and athletes, especially ones that haven't talked to us first, right? That are down the line in their career and are facing essentially bankruptcy or insolvency. So that's an area that, and there's a lot of times I've heard you offer a solution related to bankruptcy, even when it wouldn't be as typical, and it has to do with a lot of potential legal defaults or legal pursuits. So in the context of business management for high-profile clients, at what point do you think bankruptcy is an answer, or how do you avoid it?
Bankruptcy is a very interesting subject. It's both a sword and a shield. It can be a sword for a creditor. It can be a sword for someone who is in a legal dispute. So that's a whole other podcast, Kent. It's also a shield in that there are circumstances that come up where finances have become tough, or there's something that's gone bad in a business where bankruptcy is an option. There's a lot of different kinds of bankruptcy. There's Chapter 7, which is liquidation bankruptcy. There's Chapter 11, which is reorganization. There's 13, which is individual reorganization. There are all sorts of things that apply to them. Lots of good exemptions now in California. A lot of tools are available for debtors in bankruptcy. And the good news for our sorts of clients is that if they find themselves facing those sorts of things, they're usually non-consumer bankruptcies. They usually have to do with a lot of business debt, so they don't have to go through a lot of the qualifications to become bankrupt because it's business debt. So lots of things with bankruptcy there. It's something to be avoided, but when it's needed, it's a tremendously good tool. And there's a lot of myths about it. There's a lot of things like, well, I'm going to lose everything. Not true. My credit's ruined for 7 years. Not true. Those are superficial myths that not true when you do the things that I'll show you. I can tell you to do. But again, we could talk about that for
sounds
a while.
like there's a lot more to talk about. Well, we started this conversation with estate planning. I'll classify that as death because my analogy, which is I think apropos here, is start with death and taxes as the end.
Two unavoidable things.
Unavoidable things. So tax implications, which is what I delve with for clients on an everyday basis. Wealth management perspective for wealthy family groups that we serve, but specifically for high net worth, high profile clients, you really got to think about income, especially an artist on tour or athletes, income earned in different states, huge implications on that. Sometimes they think of themselves, oh, I just shot this movie in Puerto Rico, or what country, international implications of revenue streams, tax implications of royalty revenue, tax implications of if they go into a branding deal and they have merch, sales tax issues, income tax issues, capital gains issues, and of course, estate tax issues. That interweaving of all those high-end tax implications are an area that we spend a lot of time being, call it the coach or the teacher for our clients, to have them understand that, just at a very high level, to know that we have them covered. And one of the things that we do for our clients, I know, is that I think is unique, is that we have a process that is a tax reserve. So to know that our clients' money is always safe as income comes in, it's a reserve for the tax implications that they may have. Now that's before tax planning, of course, right? So this is raw tax. What if you take in their average, call it applicable rate, then we would take that rate, apply it to their gross income, reserve that cash. And then when we do great tax planning, guess what? Our clients love getting that bonus.
Yeah. And I think that's incredibly important and so often overlooked, because how many times have we had a new client where, you show them their tax return and it says they owe $500,000. It's like, what?
Yeah.
How do I owe $500,000? Where am I going to get $500,000? It's like, well, you made
a few million.
You're going to have some taxes, but I spent it.
Yeah, exactly. So
and I don't have it. I spent it. Well, we hope you not do that.
Well, we encourage our listeners, if you're an attorney or accountant or fascinated by the world of high-profile, high-net-worth clients, we have a lot of valuable insights, and I can talk about war stories or fun stories for our clients. Some of the perks we get to sometimes do, even though once they unchain my cuffs to my desk, and I'm out of tax busy season, we really enjoy interacting with them and like watching them grow, our clients. And we've got some clients that have grown from, call it their first indie film to being the next superhero, and that's been really rewarding for us to watch. Well, I think that's we've come to an end for tonight too. There's so much more we could talk about for our high net worth clients, profiles of celebrities and athletes, but I think that's for another podcast. So if everyone here and listeners out there like what we have, what we've talked about, and would love to hear us talk about this more, please like and subscribe, and send any questions you might have to podcast@taxis.com. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Thank you for listening, everyone.